Good morning, Paul. Now, this has been an ongoing inquiry for some time now, but what are we expecting to happen today?
Yeah, I think this is actually probably the most important section of the inquiry now. We've had all the discussions about how Horizon was set up, the human impact from the postmasters themselves and what it's meant to them, and about how they were investigated. Some really shocking testimony there. What we're going to hear today and tomorrow is from Alan Bates, who everybody knows from the series Mr. Bates in the Post Office now, setting the scene really for us to work out who knew what when. And tomorrow we've got Lord Arbuthnot, James Arbuthnot, who was such an amazing campaigner when he was a member of Parliament. And then you're into all the various chief execs and chairmen of the Post Office over those years, and of course Fujitsu themselves, the software manufacturer who provided Horizon itself. But today is going to be that scene setting from Alan Bates, who's such an amazing local hero for all of those post campaigners.
It was fascinating, Paul, wasn't it, how so many of those sub-postmasters who'd got together, I think it was 15 years ago actually, in a village called Fenny Compton in the middle of England. We remember from the ITV series that Alan Bates sort of put a pin in a map in sort of the centre of the country. He'll be drawing inspiration from them, I'm sure. What can he tell the inquiry that isn't already in the public domain? What more information can he give them, do you think, Paul?
Well, I think what he will talk about, I suspect, is really about his struggles with the executives, the post office executives, etc. Because, as I say, I think we know it's difficult to imagine, but we know the scale of the problem. We know the impact on all of those thousands of postmasters, many of whom were convicted, some of whom had massive financial losses. But he has been battling away since then, and where the post office were doubling down on the problem. And that, I think, is what's got to be unpicked, because it's one thing over those 20 years of investigation, knowing when people thought they were the only postmaster in the country that was going through this. But afterwards, when the litigation order that he led was going through, and the post office kept doubling down, trying to recuse the judge from the proceedings, trying to really outspend those campaigners. It's that period that the human cost really kicked in.
And Paul, this inquiry was established in September 2020. Why has it taken so long to get to this phase 5 and 6?
Yeah, it always was. I mean, this is the frustrating. It's when I set it up in the first place, and I originally made it non-statutory because I wanted it to go through as quickly as I could and make sure that the cost of it, which is going to be massive, obviously, with the lawyers involved and the timescales, that the money didn't go to lawyers, it went to the victims. Clearly, though, as soon as you started scratching the surface and you saw the depth and you saw some of the words of the judge in the appeal court, as people like Joe Hamilton were their convictions were quashed, it became apparent it had to be statutory. But that inevitably means that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of evidence that have to be disclosed. Post Office have been quite slow in doing so, and their record keeping over 20 years hasn't been brilliant. So that in itself has meant it's stretched out quite considerably.
Paul, do you agree with your successor as Post Office Minister, Kevin Hollingrig, that there should hypothetically be prosecutions here, perhaps even people jailed who were in senior positions in terms of what they knew when? Is that the next logical step once this inquiry concludes, or maybe even already?
Yeah, undoubtedly. No, I think it's got to. I think it's got to conclude. I think undoubtedly that's got to be, a very serious option on the table there, because, and this is the bit of the inquiry I think that's really going to start to uncover that. But I think it's right to make sure that we get this done. And the last stage of the inquiry starts in September. So by the end of the year, Sir Win Williams, the retired judge that's chairing the inquiry, will have all of the information. He will then be able to write up his report, and early in the new year we'll have all of that evidence that then we can cut up and work through who needs to be prosecuted. Do we need prosecutions? Do we need those convictions? And what redress is there? So, because everybody talks about all of these inquiries, let's make sure it never happens again. Rarely do you actually see something that actually means this cannot ever happen again. That's what we've got to get to.
And Paul, just briefly, matters in your own party. William Wragg has stood down from the 1922 committee, the Backbenchers committee. He's also stood down from a role on a select committee. Is that the right thing? Is that the right thing that he has done that? Should he stand down as an MP? I know he's standing down at the election, for example, but should he do it sooner than that?
I think it's the right thing that he stepped down. I think it's a really sad state of affairs. I don't think he should step down as an MP. He is going. It's only a matter of a month now, likely. You know, if you think about if there's going to be an October or November election, in reality, we're going to go through to July to the summer recess, and then we'll only be back for a couple of weeks in September. So he'll have a lot of time to reflect on what he's done. I think it's a sad state of affairs because I think his emotional well-being has not been good over a period of time, and it's affected many people in a very serious way.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Conservative MP and former Post Office Minister Paul Scully.